distant future, where many companies were acquiring cloud more to placate their sales team, to make their sales team, happy and to acquire some, but more to keep a relationship positive and happy going forward. What we're finding as of late, maybe last 3 to 4 quarters, is that many of those companies are now actually dabbling or using those cloud offerings in real production and non-production deployments. What we're finding is that the acceptance level has absolutely grown because of a couple reasons, but one of which is those companies that may have been given, the try and buy or some significant discount to actually have cloud credits being owned, even if they had no plan on using them. Those companies have actually tried the Oracle cloud offerings in the past, the IaaS, as well as mostly the SaaS model cloud credits, and have actually been very, very, very happy with the deployments of those cloud offerings. Now, keep in mind that AWS is really still the industry leader out there, and the majority of the cloud migrations that we're seeing are to AWS, and to a much lesser extent to Azure. However, the Oracle increases that we're seeing and the acceptance levels that we're seeing from Oracle are definitely climbing on a much rapid pace. So it started much lower, but it's increasing much more rapidly. So we're definitely seeing them as one of the top 3 players, top 3 or 4 players in the market at this moment.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Elliot. And just a reminder for our audience, for more in-depth information, you can always visit our website at miroconsulting.com or email us at sales@miroconsulting.com. All right, our next question is, this was submitted by a member of our audience. I have a ULA, Unlimited License Agreement, which concludes in May 2017. What should I be doing now?
Okay, you have a ULA, which is an unlimited license agreement, which concludes in May of 2017, which is 6 months from now. What should I be doing now? Well, yeah, this is a pretty frequently asked question. I mean, we get many companies who have ULAs who are, looking at some future termination date or end date of that ULA. And to be honest with you, 6 months is perfect time to start heavy strategic planning of your environment, of your deployment, of your post-mortem, post-May activity. As much investment of time and resources as you've put into the original ULA negotiation, you should be looking at the same type of investment now in effort, energy, and strategic planning in the end life of that ULA for many reasons. One is that a typical ULA on expiration becomes converted from a ULA, which is an unlimited license right, to a fixed quantity of products, which is fixed upon the last day of that agreement, or what's called the certification date. So as an example, if your ULA ends May 30th, 2017, whatever your deployment is on May 30th, 2017 becomes your unlimited license right. Becomes your perpetual license right, and it gets fixed at that number. So it behooves you to look at your deployments, your strategic plan for the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and even a few years out, to determine maybe what projects you want to move forward on, to pull forward. You may want to look at what issues or maybe M&A activity or maybe what business developments may be happening post-May, because starting June 1st, as an example, you no longer have an unlimited license right. We've heard of client horror stories where, 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks after a ULA certification, a client finds themselves out of compliance, either because of a business issue or because there was an application that was in dev test that was now moved to production and servers are needed, or it could be from a server refresh. People sometimes forget that most of Oracle's tech accounting rules go by a very complex calculation of OS times with hardware times core counting, and if you're having a server refresh coming up anytime soon, you may be increasing the amount of a CPU's licensed requirements substantially. So you may be inadvertently putting yourself out of compliance with that next server refresh. So that should be taken into account. Also keep in mind, too, that many companies renew their ULAs or renegotiate their ULAs for more time. A very popular strategy is that if you do see an event coming up post-certification date, let's just say 6 months later, 9 months later, a year later, you can negotiate an extension of that ULA for 1 more year, for 6 months even, or for multiple years. And so then you're not, setting yourself up for a huge unplanned, unbudgeted liability down the road. So in summary, there's a lot of planning that needs to be done between now and May. We get involved in dozens and dozens of ULA analysis, and I can tell you no two of them are exactly the same. Everyone has their unique challenges, but the one thing that definitely gets lost in the sauce from the senior management levels on ULA terminations is the fact that they are just as important, just as serious, and require just as much investment of time as the initial ULA negotiation.
Excellent. Thank you very much. That's a pretty good answer. I'm sure that the person with this agreement that's concluding in May will take that under advisement. All right. Moving on to our next question. The dreaded Oracle audit letter. So someone asked, I received an Oracle audit letter. What should I do first?
Okay, well, I guess you received an Oracle audit letter. What should you do first? Well, the first thing is to determine, is it a formal audit letter or is it an informal audit letter, right? As I stated earlier, a formal audit letter is coming from LMS, which is the License Management Services, and that is the official auditors of the vendor Oracle Corporation. Informal would be a letter or a note coming from someone who's not an LMS auditor, someone in sales, someone in contracts, someone in some regional manager, someone who's not an official auditor sending you a note saying they want to review something. Okay, now just staying on the side of the formal. Now let's assume that it's a formal audit for a moment. Well, within the formal audit notification, they should be citing some kind of contractual clause that allows them to audit you. Typically, it's something within your SLA, that a note in your SLA that calls for Oracle to have that right to audit you upon notice. Now, keep in mind that when you get this formal audit letter, as I said earlier with a ULA renewal or termination, you need to have just as much investment of time and seriousness into the process of renewal or certification as you do the original ULA. Well, you need to take the first few steps of an LMS audit just as seriously as you would the end of the audit, where you're maybe hammering out or negotiating the settlement, because those first few steps are really, really huge. And this is where a majority of Miro Consulting's work comes into play, where we're brought in to help facilitate or just work on the logistics and the back and forth, because the beginning stages, those first few steps, can really set the tone and really set up the table for whether or not there's going to be a huge, perhaps huge settlement, or perhaps a good finding as a result. What you want to be able to do is, first of all, understand what your rights are. Understand what that clause is. Does it give you 60 days to respond? Does it give you 10 days to respond? Also, to try to determine what exactly is being audited. Is it your Oracle applications, your Oracle technology, or is it one specific product or program? Keep in mind that many Oracle audits are either apps or technology, but some are both. Also, keep in mind too that your audit for your specific environment, it may not go by the same process or rules as maybe another audit that may have just happened a year before. It may be a totally different type of style and process, and even verification tools or methodologies. So it's really important that from the get-go, you kind of have a good sense of what this audit is going to unfold and turn up. What we like to tell clients is, you almost want to have a mindset of, let's get all the skeletons out of the closet, let's get all the surprises out front, and get the elephant in the room uncovered before the audits start, right? You want to have what we call a friendly audit, self-imposed audit, conducted where maybe a third party, and we do these all the time, where you can conduct an audit to determine what issues are lying that you may be able to remedy, that what issues are there that you may want to handle. And you may determine that the assumptions that you have and have had for many years are false assumptions of what your license right is, of what you're entitled to for deployment, of perhaps a definition. I'll give you an example. We had a client bring us in because they felt they were pretty certain that they knew what they had deployed, and the fact that they said to us 99% sure they're compliant. Well, after review, what we determined is one of their groups had an incorrect assumption, a false assumption, that a particular development environment didn't require licensing. This was uncovered during our audit. We were able to inform the client, and the client was able to, make a remedy of that and correct that false assumption. Now, to understand, this could have been hundreds of thousands of dollars in penalties, back support. I mean, the things happen during the course of business that does create assumptions that maybe take some liberties. And it's really important that you understand what your liabilities are. And I would say you need to conduct an annual audit because the business changes. Your agreements are static, yet your business and the market is dynamic. Things change. And if you have an audit that's 3 years old, it's too long. I would suggest annual to ensure that you are compliant and don't have an unbudgeted or surprise liability coming.
All right, thanks a lot, Elliot. And just again, remind our audience, if you have any other questions regarding Oracle, your audit letter, or any audit letters from any other major groups, like I previously mentioned, IBM and Microsoft, please give us a call. All right, I think we have at least time for one more question here. How do I protect my on-premise software license investment while moving to the cloud?
Excellent question. Excellent question. Because this is the type of question I would be asking, if I'm sitting in the client's shoes, is that, in some of the companies that we speak with, they may have invested, tens of millions of dollars in a pretty complex on-premise software, hardware, infrastructure, and now all of a sudden there's the decree from parts of the organization that they need to start moving applications to the cloud. And now they need to start maybe moving their hardware to the cloud, or maybe they need to start moving entire platforms to the cloud. And then you start to scratch your head and say, wait a second, we just signed a long-term agreement of software only 2 years ago, or we have a hardware environment that doesn't have a refresh for another 3 years, or we may have some software licenses, that may have a shelf life of at least 2 to 5 more years as far as depreciation schedule. How do I deal with all this? And it's really important to understand that, you know, from a software and a licensing perspective, you have a lot of work to do when you're going to move to the cloud that you need to do proactively. And there's a review of your software agreements that's needed to understand any potential liability during the migration period. You need to understand that you're still liable for potential licensing issues on your on-premise when you're moving to the cloud. Case in point, talking to one company a few months back, where, you know, this organization was moving, in their view, an 18-month plan to move all critical business apps to the cloud. Well, they started with some smaller apps, non-business critical, and they started moving others. And meanwhile, as they're moving, you know, they're essentially ignoring the on-premise licensing rules and letting support drop for some on-premise software licenses. The issue with all that is they fell out of compliance, but not just falling out of compliance. They also didn't realize that some of their licensing nuances that they had may have been employee-based and not by user. So just because they dropped usage down to only 2 people, you know, maybe looking at some legacy information, their licensing rights were based upon employee. So, you know, the total employee count is what drove the price. On top of that, support is needed, because just because you're moving something to legacy for on-premise for a few years doesn't mean that you don't need patches or potential upgrades to be able to access that information easily. So it's really important to know that there's 2 sides to every discovery when you're moving to cloud. There's a discovery of ensuring that that move to the cloud is going to give you same functionality or better, understanding that, you know, you're going to turn a switch, but it may be many switches. It may not just be one switch. But you also need a discovery the other way, and that is, how do you protect your legacy applications? How do you protect your legacy data? And how do you really have an exit strategy for all of those software agreements that were in place on your on-premise prior to the move to the cloud? And ensuring that, you know, you do officially exit from those agreements and eliminate liability. Very important. And that's, so it's really a 2-part project. It's how do I move forward, and how do I close out, you know, what's left behind. And as long as you take care of both those sides, then you can ensure a proper move to the cloud that's compliant and leaves nothing to be surprised, no surprises down the road.
All right, Elliot, thank you very much. We have one more question. What is the best time of the year to cut a deal with Oracle? It used to be May, which is the end of their fiscal year. Is that what it still is, Elliot, or has it changed?
Well, yeah, and for many years, and, you know, we've been involved solely in this business now for, you know, about 16 years, going on 17, and I'll tell you that absolutely was the case, maybe until the last couple of years, the last few years, where Oracle, you know, it really has changed its methodology in terms of how it deals with year-end deals. I mean, of course, every vendor, you know, is every publicly held vendor has an element of quarterly driven results and annual results. But what we find is that you really can obtain, you know, great licensing terms and conditions at any time of the year, if if you plan it out well, you determine need, and you negotiate based upon the need. And what we find is that, you know, in many cases, I'd say more often than not, you know, having more time to negotiate and to work out exactly what you want will benefit the client than just getting a few extra points at the end of a year end. You know, what we like to say is that, you know, to save a little money on something you don't need really will get you nowhere, right? And you have to keep in mind that software licensing, I mean, you don't own the software. You own the right to use the software in a very specific way. and to really game out what you need and what you need it for, what business issue you're trying to solve with the software, what is the value of solving that business issue, and ensuring that a lot of that data and information goes into the negotiation. This is not something that gets done, with 24 hours left in an Oracle year or an Oracle quarter. And even if you are successful, and even if you wait to the bitter end, and squeeze out an extra point or two, what are you really giving away, by not taking the time to really plan it out, get some third-party advice perhaps, or at least just really drill down as to, the needs that are being solved and resolved by the programs that you're buying under the terms and conditions that you're buying them under. So, what we find is that, just as important as discount are the terms, conditions, and concessions that go into the deal.
All right. Thank you very much, Elliot. I believe that's about all the time we have for today. If you have any further questions, you can please send them to us. We are at miroconsulting.com. You can reach us at sales@miroconsulting.com. And if you'd like to call us, our number is 732-738-8511. That's United States area. So again, it's 732-738-8511. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And if you have any further questions, again, please feel free to call. That concludes our webinar for today. Thank you and have a great day. And don't forget to vote.